Hello there and welcome back to CM4D Basic Training. In this module, what we'll be considering are some options for propagating or creating your graph or chart annotations, and also how to use auto report to quickly get charts on the page in order to create the layout that you'll need to display all of your charts. So to begin with, what we can do is make a new sheet set where we will use the auto report and look at some layout techniques for the charts that we created previously. So what I'll do is here on the sheet set tab, I'll right click and choose new sheet set, and I'm going to call this auto report charts. Once I do that, I'll hit OK, and I'll have a brand new sheet set in my list that starts with a title sheet, an array, and a sheet 1. We mentioned before in a previous module that on the title sheet you can make a header block where it has information about the part you're displaying, like the routine name, maybe the first and last date and time for the samples that you have selected, any other type of relevant information, or even things like a logo for the company that the report is for. All that can be done here on the title sheet. Again, to make things simple, I can just make a text box here, go to properties and put in a variable for routine. Make sure this is looking at the query, and just have that loaded. Of course, you could have other information in here, add something like part number, like so, to make it more elaborate, but the idea is basically the same for putting together either one or multiple text boxes, or maybe a table that has variables in order to display the information you need for your title sheet. But once you have that, to do the auto report, there's a typical way, which is having a view in the middle and having charts around. So to get a chart, I'm going to go back to my main set. And right now it's on the array page. I can see that there's some charts on the second page. So if I click on that page, or I can right click here and say go to sheet, that'll work as well. I can borrow one of these reports or this chart. So I can say copy. Also, I can do that for the view itself. So I can click on the view, hold shift, click on the chart, and then right click on and choose copy, and that will copy both annotations. If I go back to auto report, the sheet 1, I can right click on this white space, go to clipboard, choose paste, and paste that information here on the sheet. So to use auto report, there are a few rules for setup. The first rule is that auto report uses one chart or annotation as the base for making all of the charts within the data set that the first chart is connected to. So in that chart, if we right click and go to properties and go to leader, the view that you're going to use for the auto report has to be explicitly defined here under feature located in view. Sometimes if you have more than one view, this might be blank, and although the chart could be pointing to the right view, we still need to click on the drop down and choose the exact view that we want to use for the auto report. We should also note the data set that this chart is connecting to. Right now it's this data set A. If I want more data, I could connect here to table data that we used before, make it use row 1. I can use any data set I want, just depending on the type of data I want to show in these charts. But what I do want to show is that regardless of the data set you use, the data set or the data source of the chart and the data source of the view have to be the same for auto report to work correctly. So if I go here to this view and go to properties, it has a data source as well. I need to click there, and where it says data set, I have to choose the same data set that was used by the chart. So here I will choose table data. Since this is a view, I can use all rows. And now it's looking at the same set of data as the data source of this chart. While we're here, if I go here to properties, there's an option here to use for auto report called Uncross Leaders. We'll want that turned on so that anytime we change the view, once auto report is run, the software will automatically reorient all the charts in the leader line so that they don't cross anymore. So it's a time-saving measure so that you don't have to manually move charts around a lot if you want to get a better orientation or angle for your view after the auto report runs for the different pages. So we'll look at how that works soon. Of course, we went over some of these other options in some of the other modules. We can consider the auto orient after the auto report runs, or we can actually turn that on. If I go to setup, it says orient to plane of features, orient to vector. There's different options here. We'll take a look at those. So I'm going to choose this Uncross Leaders. We've made sure that the data source for the view is the same as the data source of the chart, which is this table data. And then finally, we have to make sure that depending on where we want the chart to populate on the page, for the auto report options, we can have it populate on the sides and along the bottom and the top of the page. But the software will only do that if there's no interference between the chart and the view object itself. So as we see these two are overlapping, I would have to shrink this view so that there is space for this chart to multiply going across the top, along the sides, and along the bottom. So a good way to judge that is to just move the chart near the bottom and see if there is clearance for it to move without touching the sides or overlapping with the view here. So if you plan to have the chart go around all sides of the page, you would need to shrink this view to accommodate the charts without it overlapping the box of the view. But if you want it to go just along these two sides, then you can make the view bigger for the horizontal lines at the top and bottom, since you'll only propagate along the sides if you want. Either way, just depending on how you plan on organizing the charts around the view, which option you'll use. So once those considerations are done, to use auto report, you would make sure you're on the first sheet of the sheet set that you're going to use. You'll go here to sheet, choose auto report, and in this dialog where it says report annotation, it will give you a list of all the annotations that are on the first page. Sometimes you might have more than one chart, but for the auto report to work, you have to pick just one of the charts that are on the page. So this chart 1 happens to be the name of this one object. If I go here to Properties, General, the annotation label is chart 1. If I change this to another name, Auto Chart, then if I go back to here, I'll see that new name reflected. So I'll choose the name of one of the charts. Error annotation we don't have for this, so I actually don't have to worry about this particular case. This is a special case of having an error annotation. And the layout technique, this is deciding how the auto report will run. So if I do single sheet, it will try to put all the charts for this data set that the chart's connecting to all on one page and shrink the charts to size so that they all fit on one page. That's sometimes used, but another option is to say multiple sheets all identical. This will lay out the auto report in a particular way, and then it will copy that type of layout for all additional sheets that are needed in order to display all of the charts. Multiple sheets, one sheet different is if you have a summary sheet or one sheet that has information that you don't want on all the other sheets. Typically this is used the majority of time. Multiple sheets all identical. If this is the case, you can select the minimum space between these annotations. If I set this to 1 for both, it means that whenever the auto report executes, all the charts that are on the page will have minimum spacing between them horizontally and vertically. So the bigger this number, the more space will exist between the charts on the sides or on the bottom between them. So if I keep that at 1, that's minimum amount of space. And then margin to the edge of the sheet. This is how far away from the horizontal and vertical margins will the chart be as the software multiplies it around the sheet. So if we have these settings, the placement is going to be where you want the charts to multiply around the view. If I have all selected, it will try to multiply the chart around all corners or all sides. You can select just one or more depending on how you want the charts to display. Once that's done, you can save the setup if you want to use it for later. Or if I go back and go to auto report, I can choose run. And if I hit run, it will create however many pages are necessary to do the auto report. So when the auto report runs, it will add charts to the pages in the order that was set within the data set that the chart is connecting to. So whatever SIFT rules for ordering we're using that we saw in previous modules regarding the filters, the conditions, the sorting, or the columns here for sorting columns and rows, whatever settings we have which will affect how data is sorted, the auto report will go by those settings and sort that information in that order. So we see that it has a certain layout that's repeating on the pages. If we go back, while auto report is turned on, You can always adjust a view. So if I change this to show the other side, because we had the option for Uncross Leaders turned on, it reoriented or recalculated where the graph should be so that the leader lines don't cross on that page. So basically, while auto report is still turned on, I can use different options to zoom in or get better views for my part. Without having to manually move the charts around to accommodate the leader lines uncrossing. But let's say that we don't want to manually do this. If we go back to this, zoom max, and right click and go back to the properties on this first page, we can choose this auto orient feature, click on setup, and say how we want to orient. Orient to plane of features, say nearest orthogonal or any angle, and then you can say zoom to features if that's what you want to do. So if we chose these options, hit OK, if we reran the auto report by just clicking here on auto report again and hitting run, it should try to redo all of the pages. If it doesn't, you can always use this other option that says undo. So there's undo and undefined. Undo resets auto report back to the first page, but the option is still turned on. Undefined turns off the auto report function so that now these are just separate pages and you can't use some of the functions that come with auto report, like auto orienting in order to get the leader lines to uncross. So if I do undo auto report, it will reset back to first page. If I go back to properties, just checking that these options are still on. If I go sheet, auto report, run, looks like in this case it's not moving the image. So let me see what type of features these are. These are surface features. They have vectors, so that should move. Let me undo. Orient to vector of features, any angle, zoom to features. So if I do this now, seems like it's zooming to features of the very first view. So I think there's some optimization that needs to happen with this auto orienting. Honestly, the best choice would be to orient your view in a general sense for the first page. Execute the auto report so that that first page propagates to all the other pages. Well, in this case, let's see, undo, and then do auto report again. And then on each page, while auto report is still turned on, you can zoom in and reorient the points. Or the image itself to get a better view of the surface. And then once that's done, if you need to make more corrections, you can do so after turning off auto report. Not undo, but this undefined. One thing to mention is that while auto report is still on, when I go to sheets, I cannot delete any of the sheet sets. It says invalid operation with auto report. So if I did want to make major changes, I would need to undefine. I can still move charts around, but if I ran auto report again, the positioning, I think, would reset itself. So, and then of course that it keeps the previous pages here unless I undo the auto report and then redo it again. But at this point you can say undefined, and now if I wanted to, I could delete these individual pages. So auto report might not complete the template or the report creation, but it does allow you to get what information you need on the page before turning off the feature and revising the report by modifying the views, changing the positions of the charts to get the best user view to read the information. So that's one of the most common ways of propagating data is using auto report. Once that's done, one other technique that's typically used is to make sure that the charts, which might be looking at a particular row in the data set, get converted to look at the particular feature that it's displaying. That way, if all the charts are looking at the feature of the data set that the charts are connecting to, the features can change in their ordering in the data set and not affect how the charts are drawing to the view. Because if this is looking at row 1 and then another point goes on row 1, then this is going to point to that other point, and the orientation that you have in the layout might be disrupted because now charts are pointing to new locations on the CAD. So to nail down the chart to the feature itself, there's an option here for document, miscellaneous called annotation data source fix. So if we click on this option, it will give you a list of the sheets, the annotations, the data set, the type of use, the row number that it's connecting to, and the data or the feature it's displaying within the sheet set that you're on. So we're on auto report charts. We're seeing the information about all the charts on this auto report sheet set for pages 1, 2, 3, and 4. So right now the use is set to row. If we want to change this to be feature, we can click on convert. And now we see that the use is set to feature, and it's showing the feature in question. So with that, all of the charts now, if we go to data source, are looking at the feature that was on the row it was previously looking at, and the particular dimension that was on that feature. So this means here in the table data set, if I go to this list, I could change the ordering within here of this data. Like I can move these 2 points to the very top, and that will not change the ordering here of the charts, because now the charts no longer care about the row number but are looking at the particular feature for the data. So that's the main way that we can propagate sheets, propagate charts or graphs or other annotations using the auto report. Another way is to do what's called a chaining method, which is slightly different. So for something like that, as an example, if I just delete these pages again for this example, and get rid of these, and I'm back to just this one. One thing we saw with previous annotations, and again, if I set this to look at row 1, I'm back to the original. If I hold control and drag, of course, we saw in a previous module that that's one way of propagating data. Also, if you notice how the line is coming off the bottom for all of these charts, one thing that does need to be fixed with the auto report is after the auto report is done, whatever line is closest, that's going to be the one that, whichever corner or side is closest on the chart to the CAD, that's going to be where it draws off of the chart, but it turns off all the other draw points. So I'm going to turn those back on in this case. But yeah, we saw how if we use control and drag, we can get more charts on the page. Another way is by right-clicking and using this chain operation. So chain creates the charts for every row in the data set that the chart or graph is connecting to at the same time. So if I do chain create, it's going to create a blizzard of all of the charts. And then it gives you options for arranging, whether vertical, horizontal, rows, or round view. So if I did vertical, of course it will try to give me a vertical line. While chain is still on, I can always go back and say arrange. If I did horizontal, it will try to do it horizontally, but of course there's too many charts for this one page. There's rows and columns, which might be useful if you don't have a view in the middle and you just want a page of charts, and then you have setup options for each one of these as well. So down, then across, across, then down. If I set the spacing to 1, number in first row or column, if I say 4, then it will propagate according to those settings. Around view tries to put it around the view using different predefined techniques. But with all these methods, again, it's all on one page, so it's a little sloppy, so to speak, to try to have everything on one page. And now there's a kink in the line. So one way to do chain that I do, let me start from scratch with this. I'm going to delete these, keep this one, and I see I have a kink here now in the chart. If I want to get rid of that, I can right click, go to miscellaneous options, delete kinks, and again, if I make that look at row 1, if I say chain, create, typically I don't use any of the arrange methods. I just hit cancel, and then if I make a box that grabs or touches all of the charts, I could do something like this where I say align left. It pushes all the charts to the left edge, and if I right click again, align bottom, I can stack my charts up and look at where they're pointing to on the view. And if I lock this view by right clicking, going to properties, general, and choosing locked, so that I no longer can click on the view without holding control. If I highlight a particular terminator that you see here, I'll draw a box around a group, I could potentially start sectioning off those charts in order to determine what my layout might be for pages that I create. And from that point, I could create new pages, cut charts from one page to another. For instance, here, right click, new sheet. If I go to array, if I hold control, I can right click, say copy, right click on this page, paste to get the image. And then I can either highlight these, right click. So if I hold these, I can right click, go to little save, choose cut. They're still chained. So in order to move these to another page while they're chained, basically I right click on any one chart, I go to chain and choose Unchain. When I do that, it'll draw a box around everything that was unchained. If I click on the outside, I can now just draw a box to highlight everything on this group, I can right-click, load, save, cut, right-click, clipboard, paste, and it will paste those charts here. Or I can simply draw a box and then click and drag to the new page. And if I make new pages and do that for these other groups, I can then create my own pages, move the charts one by one to separate them, and organize my report based on whatever layout technique that's necessary or that the company you're working for wants, because sometimes companies are very particular about the layout and how they want to see their charts organized. So that's the second way, by using the chaining operation to start a report layout outside of the auto report. So with that, I'd like to thank you for watching this module and hope to see you for the next one.